Hello, welcome to this very special edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at Sony Hall, one of the new music venues here in New York City, which is run and operated by the Blue Note Entertainment Group. Tonight, blessing this brand new stage is an iconic jazz drummer who spans both jazz, rock, as well as world music forms. Billy Cobham tonight is on tour, and he stopped here at Sony Hall to play music which was part of his very pivotal part of his career. He's revisiting Crosswinds, which was his second solo record on Atlantic Records as a leader. And tonight we sat down and broke bread about why this record was so different from Spectrum and how this album set him to become one of the most preeminent drummers in the world. Also tonight we're going to sit down and reflect on some of the musicians that were on this recording, including the late Michael Brecker, as well as John Abercrombie and the legendary George Duke. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Mr. Billy Cobham performing music from Crosswinds here on the Pace Report, reporting live at the brand new Sony Hall here in New York City. You know, Billy, the last time we broke bread, we were not too far from where we're at right now. We were BB Kings, and we were celebrating Spectrum. And now we're celebrating another milestone of a recording, which was your second album,
Mm-hmm.
Crosswinds.
Mm-hmm.
Paint a picture back in '73 when you were writing and composing and putting your thoughts together, putting this record together.
It was a picture of desperation because I knew that I wasn't going to have a gig soon with the band I was with, which was the Mahavishnu Orchestra. So I'd already been. It was an indication that the band was going to stop, and that we're going to form another band, and I wasn't included. Nobody else in the first band was included. So I had to find a way to reinvent myself or to move on alone. And the main thing was to make a piece of product that was my calling card. So that started in '73 with Spectrum. After making that, something really interesting started to take. I started to become aware of, which was that in the recording industry at the time, bands could not really go on the road and do anything without losing heavily without the support of the record company. And the way the record company would support you is if you went and made a record. And I went, okay. Spectrum Record was doing really well, so I had a chance to keep everybody hoodwinked a little while longer until they realized this guy didn't know what he's doing when he's writing music. Not at this point in time enough, but it sounded like it would. So if I could just get in under the radar and make one more record, that would extend their reason for supporting me, and no matter what. So hence, I think what happened, I had some ideas that started to come to the surface after having traveled to Japan. And having done that, I wanted to create a presentation that was a follow-up to the Spectrum project. Now, because I set up all this stuff with grooves on Spectrum, we had the Red Baron, we had Stratus, we had Lee, okay, and after that we did a Spectrum 7, and Quadrant 4 was like this up-tempo 4 thing, just shuffle, that was kind of leaning towards Mahavishnu, 5 tunes, that's it. The next project, I wanted to show really what I could do, because I thought I had arrived, like a kid who felt like he just learned all of his rudiments, so all of a sudden he was the best player in the house. In the house where he lived, but he didn't know about anything outside. Anybody else playing it, the rudiments better than him. And so I decided to write some more music in a way like that, because I didn't know, I was just writing. But I did have some experiences, as I said, one in Japan, where one piece, or I should say one experience, stood out amongst everything else, and that was going to Hiroshima and kind of just sitting on a bench. I had decided when I got to the Atomic Museum that wasn't for me. I didn't think emotionally I could take it. I was more than reticent to go into the museum to see body parts of human beings, some of which were still being kept alive, so I was told at that time. Because of burns and blah, blah, blah. And seeing all these kids, which was, I guess, sort of designed in some ways to make the elders feel like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Go in. But when you saw them come back out, they were destroyed. And this experience, of course, was going to be indelible in their minds for the rest of their lives. It's just like going to the funeral when you're in second grade of a colleague who sat next to you in school in the homeroom class, got hit by a car, dead. Right. So now we got to go and travel and look at the body. Man, I'll remember that to my dying day. I never, but they made us do that, and I still remember it when that happened. And the same thing was happening to all these kids in Hiroshima, and I was sitting in the park watching the line of children go in and come back out. And I realized that, wow, over to my right, if I look up about 100 and not even 100 feet. I don't, not more. A little bit more than 30 meters up. 30 meters high was this building. It was a kind of building you almost saw in the early versions of Superman, which you're too young to know about that, where you know the guy would be up and away and leap higher than the ceiling, and it looked like this. Actually, that building, it was the Diet in Tokyo back at the time. It's still, and that still exists, and it was in L.A. They had a building that resembled it very heavily. That same kind of building was in Hiroshima, where instead of it being angular, it had a round cover on it, for lack of a better term, and all of the cement was gone. That's the atomic dome. That was where the atomic bomb literally exploded above it. And I don't know how many feet above it was. It was not very much. And for some reason, it took away only the cement. It left the whole framework of the top of the building, and the rest of the building was never touched because it was ground zero. So everything just exploded away from it. Okay. In the process, I'm sitting down on a bench for some reason that never went anywhere because it was made of, yeah, but still it was wood and cement. And what was amazing about the bench is that there was this gray matter or just gray coloring on it, like just sitting there like this is the bench. I was just there watching, and I finally looked at the bench and I realized when I looked across at the other bench, there were benches around with this kind of marking. It was gray. Turned out to be the shadow of people who were sitting on those benches at that time, and all that was left was their shadow. Yeah, right. And I went, impression? I'll bet. You know, so I don't know. I went back home with that impression in my head, and I had a theme on my mind that I started to tinker with, and it ended up developing into a piece called Heather. I don't know where, I didn't know why I called it Heather, but I called it Heather. And to this day, that's what it was. And that's not the second tune, but it is one of the pieces on the Spectrum album, on the Crosswinds album. Crosswinds being the other, Spanish Moth being that, and Pleasant Pheasant. And again, 5 compositions in essence. And they represented, at that point in time, the breakaway point from me and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And Heather was like the key composition there. Then Spanish Moss, which was somewhat of a kind of a, when you hear it, it has a lot to do with my vision of, I mean, the hell that these people must have gone through in some ways. But yet it doesn't come close to labeling, literally labeling it or not. I mean, it's just my feelings, you know. And I found that with that record, I could then go and tour. And because of that, it's testing the waters, making Total Eclipse was a no-brainer. I knew that that's how I was going to work, you see. And from Total Eclipse to Life and Times, and one thing led to the other, and I've just been making records ever since. Until, you know, because the big plus for me was, I'm a drummer. I'm not supposed to write music, so nobody ever listens to me.
I was going to ask you that, because this album, I've noticed, you put your first Spectrum, you put some emphasis on your writing, but this, I think, because of the musicians, and we're going to go into that in a second, the musicians that you put together on this record kind of enhanced mentally what you were trying to do.
Right. And it also, I knew that those particular guys were in tune to me because I was in tune to them. We had a history. We were already...
Dreams?
Yes.
Dreams.
1969-70. So I could fall back into that band anytime, and everybody know exactly what I was feeling. We'd gone through Steve Cropper and everybody down in Memphis. We had a serious history. You know, this was 69, that 1 year earlier, Martin Luther King died. I mean, we were there. I mean, it was like we were going through all this stuff. There was the Weathermen, the big riots in Chicago. We were there, you know, with Sly Stone and all of that. We were on that show, you know. And it just, you know, with Parliament Funkadelic, all at Soldier Field, we were there, you know, in the middle of that recording. Not the First Dreams album. It was done at CBS in Chicago.
To the musicians, because this album, I interviewed, God rest his soul, both of these gentlemen. I've interviewed John Abercrombie a couple of times, and then I've documented George Duke. George and you guys were at the beginning of your careers, and literally George being from Mothers of Invention, Frank Zappa, he was coming out of the whole fusion rock thing just like you were doing. What was it like you guys?
You forget. George came out of Canon.
That's right. That's right. He sure did.
And then all that Mother's of Invention things happened after that.
Yeah.
But it was still, at the base of it all, was Canon. That's what attracted me to George, because he had that thing. He was playing, he was comping. When he played a solo, every note, I mean, he was playing the blues in every note he played. Because he has a story. And that story, I don't know if it would ever be really, it would expose you to the real George Duke, because there's another George Duke than everybody knows. Trust me. I mean, I know it. I mean, I felt it. I've experienced it. There's a whole other side of this guy that's secret like you wouldn't believe. And he would play that. all the time. The last tune he made, the last record he made that was dedicated to Corinne, his wife, it said it all. It was like the closing of a major book, you know, and his life was shutting down. That's what I heard before he died. When I saw him in the video, I knew something was up, but I'd seen him, he was at my home in Switzerland less than a year before.
And this is after she passed away? Or was right
oh
before?
yeah, and it was less than a year before he passed away.
Okay.
And I knew, I mean, I shouldn't say knew, but felt that this was a turning point for him. Not that he was going to go away. That was a surprise. But not as much as when I think about it after the fact, and I go, okay, finally he's finding some rest, you know. And the way that I was told by Sheila that I mean, Stevie had to find him in the hospital and blah, blah, blah. I went, get out of here. All of this makes sense now. I mean, he was running away from something. He was my James Dean in a way, you know. Very secretive, very closed about himself, the real person inside. A lot of stuff was going on, man. And I was, oh. So when you hear him play any record, and produce anybody, all of that's there. Is a big, and so all those notes, he had a way of, he can only play, how can I put it in a different way? He can only expose who he really is through the notes. It couldn't come out in, you know, I'd say, man, how you feeling? You'd see the eyes serious, but he'd be smiling. He said, oh, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. Everything will be all right. But it wasn't all right. And there was nothing else we could do because we didn't know what to do or anybody could do, as far as I could see, to help him get through whatever he was going through.
Billy, the album, every record you did, it's diametrically different from what you were doing. You know, your history with the Brecker brothers too, and they were really at the beginning of their. I mean, you and Randy go back to Horace Silver.
Yeah.
What was it about Randy, and then also his brother, that you saw early in the game that you knew eventually these guys were going to really put their dent in the music industry?
They played their life. They played their life history. They had problems. They had, and like we all do, personal problems, family, this and that, conflicts. Every note represented that. The good things and the bad things, you know. But I mean, the bad things just stood out, you know. When I take Randy out and we played Heather, his horn would go up to the sky and he'd start to play his brother. Nobody asked him to do that. Closed his eyes and he got emotional, you know. I went, what?
Well, music is supposed to be about that too.
Well, this is a little bit, you know, it's like when you lose somebody really close. You know, mom, dad, you know, his brother was real close.
Yeah.
And he knew things, he knows things that nobody else would ever know about the family. I got an inkling of it, just a little bit. And boy, what those guys went through with Pop and all of that was pretty rough. But not physically here.
Right.
And
Is that the reason? Because you said life. Because I'm a big, still am a very big Michael Brecker fan. And it's like, when I hear his records now, I'm like, wow, he had this fire about him.
Yes, he did. And he then took it, he took every, whatever it was that was negative, and he turned it into something extremely musical, you know. He worked so hard that he almost blew his whole body apart, because he started to get sick from the stuff that he was losing air in his neck. He was, you know, but he was so totally committed to the music as a platform of expression. Woo! It's that it like Buddy Rich, who would play because he needed the gig or for whatever reason, he would play and his to the point where his body couldn't handle what was going on. His mind was so strong over his body that he just couldn't. I mean, he'd just play. He would play to keep the gig because he had to pay the rent or whatever he had to play. With Tommy Dorsey, it was a good paying gig, exposure and all of that. He played with one broken arm, one hand. I mean, all this kind of stuff. And it went down legendary. This guy was very, very, I mean, he commanded his body to a point where the body, and then of course there were the stories of all of the muscles in his body just giving way because he worked too hard. I mean, he played so hard that the body, at some point in time, that I can't keep up. The brain was forcing it to do things that it could just not do.
John Abercrombie, we lost him last year.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I look at the 70s. You guys, Schofield, Lovano, there were a lot of musicians that had to you guys had to set your path. And John was one of these guitar players that he could fit in any ensemble and just compliment anybody. Not too many people can do that.
No. And at the end, the last time I worked with him I worked with him maybe 15, 16 years ago. I had him in a band that I put together called String Quartet with the late DJ Lockwood, who passed away this year already, and bass player to be named later, I can't even remember. But those two guys, that was the last time I heard John play like the John Abercrombie I knew, only for about 32 bars of the whole week I was at the opening of the Blue Note in Milano. He played otherwise very, very, very fragilely. The sound, the feeling was very fragile. His approach was like, it was so light and soft, you know, and I was like, man, come on, you know, give it to me.
It was half the shell of what you used to.
Yeah, less. It was like maybe 1/5, you know, and I was like, get out of here. It was all right, but it wasn't that fire, you know, it wasn't that groove. And I was like, okay, I had to try. I wanted to see if this would work down the road, because we all got along, and, you know, except for the bass player, whose name I can't remember. But then we got, I don't know, we got some other cat, and it was all right, but it wasn't the same thing. But by then, John, I understood. No, John was ill. He took the gig. It was too much intensity for him. Plus, I think he had a girlfriend or wife, if I'm not mistaken, and she was herself ill, and he was already taking care of her and had to pay to bring her along with him. So he's taking care of his family while trying to play a gig on a completely different continent, you know, with us, and we're taking no prisoners, we're rocking, and he's just playing lightly, and the next thing you know, I just go, okay, this is not going to work. Okay, I get it. As much as I would love to do it with him, it's just that time has passed, you know, and I respected that, no problem.
compositions,
Okay.
writing for and composing for a group, but also for the drums, what mind state do you have to be in, and how do you document mentally what you put on paper and orchestrate it when you put it in the studio and then play it in the band?
First and foremost, you start. For me, I start with melody. I don't start with rhythm, because I know the rhythm's already there. It's not a problem. It's just how I interpret or decide to present the fundamental basic pattern of the music in presentation. That can come later. It depends on, and that depends on who's going to play it. Because if I get a Latin band to play something that I originally thought would be written for a Russian chorale, that's going to be an interesting combination and turn left. Can be done, but it has to have a real strong reason, So I wait for the rhythm thing. What I want is melodic and harmonic content. So sometimes I'll start with melody, and sometimes I'll just start with just chords and how those chords connect. If they connect correctly, the melodies will come, and the weakest ones will fall by the wayside easily.
Because I noticed with the fusion drummers, you, Lenny White, the groove is the most important element of what keeps the bass going and the whole rhythm section going.
Yeah, but groove can be misinterpreted as rhythm. It's a connection between the instruments that makes the groove. So if you have a rhythm section that is in agreement with each other, as would be found in, say, The Art of Three with me and Kenny Barron and Ron Carter, where we can stand up on a bandstand and play any of 300 tunes at any point in time, drop of a hat, and never know if it's going to be in a waltz or a 6/8 afro or a samba or anything, or straight ahead or funk, and just do that. It's because we're all thinking the same way, and it's a loop that gets closed. Once we're all thinking the same way, an idea may come. And Ron might say, "Lay out," I'll lay out. Kenny will play, and Kenny will get Kenny gets shocked by it and goes, "No, I was in it," because he was into something else, but he's doing it, and all of a sudden it starts to make some sense because he's just made adjustments. Now, Ron will point to me, and I'll play, and Ron will just lay out, and I've just got to support Kenny, and now Kenny's not just being supported; he's also feeding me information, because it's a two-way street musically. When Ron comes in, everything fits in because the low end just arrived, you see, and it's not a lot of notes. It's the right notes at the right time. It's the right feeling at the right time. We're building in a conversation, and we're coming to a climax. And at some point in time, it has to work that way in compartments, So that's important. On the other hand, say in my Art of the Rhythm section retreat in Arizona, we talk about and implement these ideas. What sounds when? Who plays them? Thinking independently. Jack Johnson, for instance, was a mistake. We weren't supposed to record a shuffle in the blues. It came out of the fact that Miles had said, "Don't play in between takes. I'll be right back." He went in, he was talking to Tio. McLaughlin, of course, decided, and it's taking too long. He started fooling around with real soft, But then Michael Henderson decided, shit, that sounds good, man. Next thing you know, now, John catches it, and I'm just listening because Miles said not to play, so I'm not playing. Grossman's not playing; he's just holding on to his saxophone. Next thing you know, I don't know what happened. My hands started moving, and next thing you know, I'm playing. And I'm not even sure if it was feeling good or not. I was mesmerized by it because I didn't think about it until Miles came out and said, I told you not to play in between takes. Everybody stopped. But because he's Peck's bad boy, McLaughlin started playing again when Miles went back in the studio. But now he took it up a notch in terms of the intensity. And Michael Henderson being, you know, this volcano waiting to erupt at any point in time. Who is this motherfucker? He ain't gonna tell me what to do? I don't think so. Next thing you know, now they're all in. And it felt so good that I don't know what happened. My hands started moving again. And next thing you know, I was in it. So now we're moving and we're playing. I don't know, Miles came outside and said, red button. What was supposed to be, we rehearsed the night before, but we were supposed to play that day. I never played it. Sessions, 3-hour session, we got in there, ballpark around 10. We were waiting to get levels at 10:30. By the time we did this thing, I was walking out of that building. It's a 3-hour session. I was walking out of there at 12 o'clock. We had done it, and I still don't understand. And in the middle of all of that, Herbie walks in with a bag of groceries and an album that he just recorded called Fat Albert Rotunda, and gave it to Miles. And Miles is saying, play. And we're like, for all we're worth, and we're all in. He drops his bag, goes over to a Farfisa organ that hadn't been played in 2 or 3 years, had dust all over it. Stan Tonkel plugs it in, sparks fly. He puts his elbows on the key because he doesn't know which keys are working. And that's all, you hear all of that on Jack Johnson.
It's one of my favorite electric records by him.
And it just happened like that. So it's an indication of how music can be, you know.
when you're thinking about these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
is it spiritual?
No,
Where is it coming from?
I don't know. But spiritual, I'm leading people in the wrong direction if I were to say that, because I don't even know how to define that. I mean, it's like I said, okay, spiritual, I guess one could relate to it as such. If you hear my Heather and you think of it as something very spiritual after the story I just told about Hiroshima. But then there's YouTube. Now, Heather was done in 70, 73, 74. 73 with the MO and recorded 74. Fast forward to the tsunami in Sendai, 2008 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Out of the blue, my friend calls me from England and said, "Billy, you got to check this out on YouTube. Somebody put Heather to the documentary of the tsunami in Sendai." I still to this day, God be my judge, I have no idea who did this. I don't know how they put the two together, but it was an atomic reactor in Sendai that they still haven't been able to control.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Spiritual, go figure, man. And I mean, I'm watching all of this happen on YouTube, and I'm saying, no name to my knowledge. I didn't call anybody. I didn't even know how to get through to anyone on YouTube to say anything. And I went, get out of here. I don't know. And every time when I see Randy or I hear George, when we played Heather, which was very rare, but Randy, John Williams, when I had a band with John Williams, we did Yoshi's, John Williams, Randy Brecker, Kenny Barron. We did Heather. Randy just lost it, man. John was tears. Because they're saying, well, Michael, something else going on there, And of course I was emotional, but I mean, it's like, hey, now I'm thinking back and I'm going, what's going on with this tune, I went to Namibia. I was in Kalahari, year '94. I was working just before I went to work with Gabriel on his last tour, on the Soul Tour. And the first time I saw a baobab tree, I never seen one before. And it's this big, huge tree. The trunk, if this room was round, it would be the trunk of the baobab tree. And would be a small, young baobab tree. It's huge, not tall, just huge and very chunky and very hard. Okay, fast forward to Recife, maybe 5 years ago, or less. It'd be 2014, 2015. I didn't know that, yes, Malayans have been, and Nigerians had been brought to the northern part of Brazil. Yes, of course, they brought their seeds from home of baobab tree. There are now 85 documented baobab trees in that region, and they're growing, huge. And I was in Pernambuco, and I was like, get out of here. I went and put my body on this baobab tree, and I just felt like, I heard it was like this. No Petrobras nearby, just, or generators or anything. And I'm coming, and next thing I know, I'm thinking about music and just having my body on it. All people, seeing pictures of people trying to put their hands around this tree. It's the tree of the communities in all of the small round ovals in Kalahari. Whenever they find baobab tree, they build a community. It's like their version of a Christian church or synagogue, the baobab tree. And they make all of the decisions around this tree in the western part of Africa, in the small villages. They all look for baobab tree. And so I wrote this piece. It's called Under the Baobab Tree. I don't know. Yeah, we'll probably play it tonight. Yeah, and it's a very special thing. really, really something. Again, when people hear it, they go, "Oh, I want to hear that." You know, there's a question about a lot of my material. I have to have a connection in life to it. The notes just don't come out just because, you know. As Horace Silver, same way. Room 608 is a very, very interesting story.
Yeah, it is.
And when you hear and you start to hear this thing, you go, "Get out of here." I get it now. Or there's a guy who was a mime in France who mimed Dizzy and Charlie Parker talking to each other, and he did both solos. Yeah, on I can't remember Scrapple from the Apple or something like this, but it was the solos, and it's just like Dizzy's playing, Charlie Parker, bip, and he's doing like this, and all of a sudden it's just one guy. Then he's looking like this. It's Charlie Parker. And then Dizzy on the other side, he turns around and goes, bip, bip, and you start to see the two of them through this guy, and their solos are being played, and he's miming their solos. So he's not saying anything, but the facial expressions and the body movement, and you start to see two different individuals, and you go, "Get out of here, man!" And that's what music to me is all about. You know, it's about the reenactment of the social environment paralleling spoken word.
I read something very interesting about your relationship with Louis Bellson.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand this because, I mean, I'm looking at your footage of you playing in the 70s. But he's the guy that introduced you and taught you how to accept adding more bass drums to your vernacular.
And all he said was, "Hey, B, what do you think of this?" And I said, "I can't do that." He said, "Why not?" I said, "There's too many of them, man. I got enough trouble playing one." He said, "Okay. Sit down and see what you feel." And I sat down. He said, "How you feel?" I said, "Strange, man." He said, "Okay. Give it about a week and see what you feel then." End of story. I mean, this is then Mahavishnu, the whole idea. And it started to fall together because he helped me. There was a place called the Professional Percussion Center. And he hung out there, Max hung out there. I was teaching there on occasion at the same time that Max was teaching, Elvin was teaching, Tony was teaching, and Papa Joe were teaching.
Wow.
All upstairs on 50th Street and 8th Avenue, called the Professional Percussion Center, Frank Ippolito's place. Drums were made there, restored there. I got the drum set that I played on, at least the bass drum and one 13-inch tom that I had, I got was given to me for a like stupid price because it was Zudi Singleton's and he had died, and it was just sitting upstairs. So Al Duffy, who also has passed away, he just restored it all. It cost me like $150, because I couldn't afford a drum set. And so they just rebuilt everything. It was RKO Radio Kings, all that kind of Radio Kings, Slingerland, Ludwig, a lot of cats that would pass through. It was a highly transient city at the time. Many guys playing cabaret, this and that, and they would leave their gear upstairs at Frank's. Frank would say, "Okay, man, when you want it, come and get it, or, pay me $5 or something like that. I'll put it I'll hold it for you." And then they would just not show up anyway because they'd die. Gear was there, man. So I told Frank Al what I was looking for. And he said, "I'll look upstairs." It took him a little while. He looked around. He said, "Okay, I found a 22-inch bass drum that'll probably work, but I need to work on it." And it took maybe 3-4 months before I saw anything. And I used that on Intermounting Flame. I used that in Dreams. Yeah. Papa Joe needed money he needed to pay the rent of the hotel. He had a Ludwig Black Beauty. I gave him $100 for that. And then the chick that I was married to at the time stole it and put it in a pawn shop. And somebody went and bought it and then sold it for $2,500. Let's not even go there. Completely different scene.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at Sony Hall here in New York City. I'd like to personally congratulate the incomparable Billy Cobham for his time. Make sure you go out and support the Crosswinds tour, which is coming to a city near you. Also, please, if you're in New York City, come and check out and support the brand new Sony Hall, which is in the theater district here in Manhattan. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.